When we look back at modern political history, few figures offer a better case study in sheer political survival than William J. Clinton. And we're going to trace the arc of a man who repeatedly faced massive political headwinds, only to completely reinvent himself and secure his place in history.
But before we get into the wild ups and downs of his career, we really have to ground ourselves in the ultimate outcomes of his two-term presidency. Right out of the gate, he oversaw a period of truly remarkable domestic economic expansion. We're talking about achieving the first national budget surplus in decades, all while driving down unemployment, inflation, and the national crime rate.
All right, let's dive into Part 1, Origins and Ascent.
To really understand his time in the White House, we have to go back to the very beginning. Born just 3 months after his father died in a car accident in 1946 in Hope, Arkansas, the son of a nurse was originally named William Jefferson Blythe III. It was only later in life that he'd actually take his stepfather's family name, Clinton. These humble post-war beginnings laid the groundwork for a deeply empathetic political style that would become his trademark. From there, his trajectory was just meteoric. His elite education quickly launched him out of Arkansas and onto the global stage. We're talking Georgetown University, a prestigious Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford, and finally Yale Law School. When he returned home, he literally hit the ground running. He narrowly lost a run for the U.S. House in 1974, but just 2 years later, he's elected as the state's Attorney General at the remarkably young age of 30.
And right in the middle of this rapid rise, something absolutely crucial happened. He married his fellow Yale law graduate Hillary Rodham in 1975. A few years later, in 1980, they welcomed their daughter, Chelsea. This marriage wasn't just personal. It created a profound, enduring political partnership that would become absolutely essential to his survival down the road.
Which brings us to Section 2, the comeback governor.
You know, if there's one defining pattern in his life, it's facing a major setback and then engineering a dramatic return. And the first major stage for this was the governor's mansion. At just 32 years old, which is incredibly young for that office, he achieved the remarkable feat of being elected governor of Arkansas. He was this rising star in the Democratic Party, just brimming with ambition.
However, that early triumph met a very harsh reality check. In 1980, voters abruptly removed him from power. He was defeated for a second term by an electorate that feared he had become a bit too liberal. It was a stunning blow, right? It could have easily ended a lesser politician's career right there on the spot. But instead of walking away, Clinton fundamentally retooled his approach. He went out, actively listened to voters' concerns, and adjusted. When Arkansas voters restored him to power 2 years later, he explicitly thanked them for giving him a second chance. This specific moment perfectly foreshadows his entire career, this unique ability to adapt, learn from defeat, and ask the public for forgiveness.
So let's move to Section 3, Winning the Presidency.
Having proven his resilience back home, Clinton set his sights much higher. He successfully captured the Democratic nomination, arguing that President Bush had neglected domestic problems following the Cold War. Now, the 1992 election was a wild, highly unique three-way race, where political independent Ross Perot split the electorate. Because of this, Clinton secured an overwhelming Electoral College majority, but he did it with only 43% of the popular vote. So, he enters the White House with a mandate for change, but without a clear, absolute majority of the public behind him.
Moving right along to Section 4, Policy Shifts and Foreign Affairs.
Once in office, his administration faced immediate headwinds. His first 2 years were packed with ambitious goals. He aggressively moved on major budget legislation. He passed NAFTA, and he attempted a massive structural reform of the national healthcare system. But, as you might know, that healthcare initiative met severe resistance and ultimately collapsed.
And the consequence of what was widely viewed as policy overreach was devastating for his party. In 1994, Republicans reacted strongly, winning a majority in both houses of Congress for the very first time in 40 years. Just like his defeat back in Arkansas, Clinton was suddenly backed into a corner.
But again, adjust he did. By declaring his famous pivot, stating the era of big government is over, he moved decisively to the political center. It was a brilliant, calculated survival strategy. By adapting his platform, he successfully outmaneuvered his opponents and regained enough momentum to comfortably win re-election in 1996 over Robert Dole.
Confronted with a Republican-controlled Congress in his second term, Clinton had to shift gears again, turning his focus heavily toward foreign policy. On the global stage, he championed NATO bombing to stop ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. He approved the bombing of Iraq to deny Saddam Hussein the capacity to use weapons of mass destruction, and he invested immense political capital trying to broker a lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
This leads us to our final section, impeachment and post-presidency.
Despite all those policy pivots and global engagements, his second term was soon entirely engulfed by controversy. In 1998, while being questioned under oath, Clinton falsely denied a sexual relationship with a White House intern. When the truth finally surfaced, his belated apology and admission that he had lied under oath just did not stop the intense, widespread demands that he either resign or face impeachment.
The outcome was an unprecedented constitutional crisis that deeply divided the Capitol. He was officially impeached by the House of Representatives on counts of perjury and obstruction of justice, but he ultimately survived removal when the Senate voted to acquit him in 1999. An undeniably crucial element of his political survival during this whole ordeal was the steadfast public support of his wife, Hillary.
So, with his controversial yet economically prosperous 2 terms finally concluded, the question naturally becomes, what happens next? How did he choose to shape his historical legacy once he left the Oval Office?
Well, his immediate post-presidency involved returning that political support right back to Hillary. In 2000, the couple established a new residence in Chappaqua, New York. This strategic move perfectly paved the way for Hillary to launch her own highly successful political career, ultimately winning election from that state to the U.S. Senate.
And he certainly didn't just retire quietly. He remained incredibly active. He built his presidential center and library back in Little Rock, he wrote his memoirs, and he oversaw the global initiatives of the Clinton Foundation. On top of all that, he was a tireless surrogate for Hillary's political career throughout her tenure in the Senate, as Secretary of State, and during her 2 presidential campaigns.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating question. Think about one of modern history's most resilient figures. From being voted out as a young governor to surviving a deeply polarizing impeachment, Bill Clinton always found a way to pivot and keep moving forward. So how much of historical greatness is driven by a strict adherence to a single vision versus the sheer pragmatic ability to survive the storm? That's something to chew on. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.